Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Michelle Gross. I am the president of Communities United Against Police Brutality, and we are here today to talk about the work that we do in terms of our reinvestigations. And what we do with these reinvestigations, that probably sounds like a strange word, but what we're doing is we are looking at police deadly force incidents and we are reanalyzing them using the existing investigation materials as well as materials that we develop ourselves and that we are able to find by re-interviewing witnesses, measuring and checking the scene, all kinds of things like that. And so we're here to talk about that work today and also to release several of the reports that we have made over the last few years of these reinvestigations and things like that. We have other reinvestigations we're doing and that we have done, but today we've chosen these 7 to release to the community. And so with that, I'm going to have us start to show the video. And Dave, can you start the video? Oh, what? I thought it was working.
Units United Against Police Brutality has been doing reinvestigations for years. CUAPB reinvestigated the killing of Walter Burks in 2004 and Jaffard in 2015. But in the past few years, CUAPB's Reinvestigation Workgroup has really gained some ground. We took on the case of Thurman June Levins, who was killed by the Minneapolis Police Department in 2018. When we opened this case, we had volunteers join the Reinvestigation Workgroup who had a diverse range of backgrounds and experiences. We had people who had their own experiences with being harassed and retaliated against by law enforcement. We had people who were peace officer certified who were able to help us look at these cases with a typical law enforcement perspective and provided us with invaluable expertise. We had students in undergraduate and graduate programs who studied police and racial injustice. We also had members who experienced a very traumatic death in their own family who brought that trauma-informed perspective into the workgroup. And most importantly, we had members of the Thurman Levins family in the workgroup too. Since then, the Reinvestigation Workgroup has worked on the cases of Cordell Handy, Travis Jordan, Darren Yonke, Cody Heisler, Jafford Smith, Justin Tigan, and Demetrius Hill. We are currently working on the case of J. Scott Allen Winmark, who was killed by the Virginia Police Department in Virginia, Minnesota in 2019. For every police killing, there is a conventional narrative that's usually in the county attorney's report when they failed to bring charges against the police officers. The Reinvestigation Workgroup searches all of the available evidence in the case to find disparities in that narrative. We then use what we find to find an alternative, truer narrative. We disseminate that narrative to the families, to the attorneys of the families, and to the media. We are extremely grateful for the many hours our volunteers put into this work group. Thank you to the family members who trusted and helped us reinvestigate their loved ones' cases. We could not have done it without all of you.
Yeah, like Michelle said, my name is Emma Peterson. I'm a member of the Reinvestigation Workgroup, along with my godmother, Nicole Kesselring, and many other volunteers with CUAPB's Reinvestigation Workgroup. Thank you all for coming. I really apologize for the technical difficulties. I want to start with a quote from Ida B. Wells. She was a civil rights activist as well as an investigative journalist and abolitionist who said that the way to right wrongs is to turn the light of truth upon them. And she also wrote that those who commit the murders write the reports. And this is something we've seen in the Reinvestigation Workgroup. As you heard in the video, for every police killing, there's a conventional narrative that is spread by the police and the county attorney to avoid holding law enforcement officers accountable. We in the Reinvestigation Workgroup research all of the available evidence that we can to find disparities in that narrative. We've been doing this work since around 2004 with the case of Walter Burks, and in the past 4 years we have done about 7 more cases and more. We disseminate the authentic narrative that we find to the families, to the attorneys, to the media, and the community. And in reinvestigating these cases, our work group has found a pattern in how officer-involved killings are investigated in the state of Minnesota. We find that key witnesses frequently aren't interviewed, the BCA agents softball questions to the shooting attorneys, evidence is mishandled, DNA, gunshot residue kits, and ballistics go untested. The families have to try to piece together what information they can they try to piece together what happened with the limited information they have, the limited resources that they have, and most importantly, the limited time that they have. In these cases, cities, counties, and the BCA, they can take months to even a year to fulfill data requests for information about these cases, if they even respond to the data requests at all. And one of our reports takes at least a year for our volunteers to go through all of the evidence, to look over all the evidence, to write our report. And families only have 3 years in the state of Minnesota to file a wrongful death suit in the midst of their grief and tremendous loss. As a community, we need to come together and question the narrative given to us by the police. We must demand the data that they are legally required to give the families and release by law. These agencies are not above the law, and they cannot withhold this information from families. We know that families want and they deserve the truth. That is what these reinvestigations are about, the truth of what happened, not what the police, the BCA, and the media tell us what happened. The families have trusted us with this work, and I couldn't be more proud to be part of this reinvestigation work group. I honor and I cherish being able to sit down with the families and talk to them about the truth of what happened to their loved ones. And the number one reason that I do this work is because I know that I have a choice to be in the streets and to volunteer, and I know that these families do not. This is why we work so hard to put together the factual narrative of what happened. These families just want to know the truth, and why wouldn't they? We must also recognize the financial burden and cost of losing someone to the police. Trying to get to the bottom of these cases costs thousands to pay for independent autopsies, pathologists, expert witnesses, and use of force witnesses, or experts. Some experts can cost up to $15,000 to $20,000 alone, and we need the community's help to cover the cost of these suits. You can donate to the CUAPB General Fund and to the Stolen Lives Justice Fund, in which 100% of the contributions to the Stolen Lives Justice Fund go directly to the families to help these cases. If there's one thing that we've learned is that you have to fight for the truth, but the truth is what matters the most to these families. So thank you all so much for coming today, and I believe I will be turning it over.
So despite the little technical fiasco that we had a little bit ago, we do have another video we'd like to show.
In April of 2022, CUAPB formed the Litigation Unit with 2 attorneys. CUAPB's President, Michelle Gross, talked about the Litigation Unit, saying, "As a police accountability organization in our 22nd year, this feels like the right time in our evolution. The Litigation Unit will continue our history of data practices and First Amendment litigation on behalf of the organization, but will also take on the difficult police excessive force and wrongful death cases that have become Paul's hallmark. We'll mix in a smattering of other civil rights cases. Paul will also work on crafting legislation toward ending qualified immunity and increasing police accountability. CUAPB has worked with individual lawyers and legal organizations for years. CUAPB has worked to get law firms to take the cases of the families of stolen lives and worked with volunteer attorneys to fight City Hall for government transparency and accountability. Our chief counsel, Paul Bossman, was one of those volunteer attorneys for several years. Since the formation of the Litigation Unit, we've had 3 powerful victories in the courts. In this country, the police are not allowed to disappear people. So when they arrest someone or otherwise deprive them of their liberty, they have to say what they did and where they took the person. But when Minneapolis police would shoot community members, they wouldn't say who the officers were or what happened. So we sued them. Jaffard was killed by the Minneapolis Police Department on December 15, 2019. We sued the city to release the names of the officers who killed him. The court denied the city's motion for summary judgment, a victory for Jaffard's family and CUAPB, saying, "The court notes for the record that in these cases, officer-involved shootings, the reasons for the public to have immediate access to specific information, such as the names of the officers involved, are compelling. Our common humanity tells us we owe at least this much to the surviving family members." In addition, in her affidavit, Michelle Gross, the president of CUAPB, explains that one media strategy often used by law enforcement agencies in the immediate aftermath of officer-involved killings is to vilify the victim. See Exhibit B to the affidavit of Paul Bossman, dated November 9, 2020. She explains that to be on a level playing field with such agencies, the families of those killed and the public must have immediate access to critical information about the shooting. The court agrees. The court is persuaded that the families of the dead and maimed are entitled to immediately know the names of those responsible. On to our next victory. Normally, once 3 years have passed, claims for wrongful death expire. Attorney Paul Bossman asked a federal magistrate judge to allow a claim of wrongful death on Marcus Golden's 7-year-old claim under an exception to the limit on claims for a death caused by an intentional act constituting murder. The magistrate judge granted the motion to add the wrongful death claim. This use of the murder exception is giving Marcus's family a chance at justice in the case of his death. But more than that, it may allow the families of stolen lives to try the killers for murder in a civil court for as long as the police officers involved are alive. On to our third victory. Qualified immunity is a legal principle that grants government officials performing discretionary functions immunity from civil suits unless the plaintiff shows that the official violated clearly established statutory or constitutional rights of which a reasonable person would have known. Qualified immunity makes it incredibly difficult to sue police officers for misconduct. Flo Ching, represented by attorney Paul Bossman, sued the city of Minneapolis and the individual officers for excessive force in the shooting death of her son, Travis Jordan. The court denied Officer Neil Walsh qualified immunity for the last 4 shots he fired at Travis Jordan. The shots were fired after Travis was lying on the ground. We are so very grateful that this case will be moving forward, and we will continue to fight for justice for Travis Jordan. CUAPB's litigation unit has only just begun. We are currently representing 5 families whose loved ones were the victim of police violence in the courts. We are representing the families of Cordell Handy, Travis Jordan, Marcus Golden, Kobe Dimmick Heisler, and Jafford Smith. We have also filed several cases about non-fatal assaults by police. CUAPB has also brought suits to hold the police accountable. We demanded they release data about what happened within days of police killings. Paul Bossman, Chief Counsel of CUAPB, said, "Now CUAPB has a litigation unit. We have 5 smooth stones, and we hunt giants."
The reason we wanted to talk about the CUAPB litigation unit today in conjunction with the Reinvestigation Workgroup is because the two really do work together. We reinvestigate the cases of police deadly force incidents, and then as we're doing this work, we're finding reasons why these families could in fact have a lawsuit. And prior to us having this litigation unit, it was very difficult for private attorneys to take these cases. These cases are very expensive to litigate. The attorneys really have to, they have to feed their families and they have to pay their expenses too. So it's hard for them to take cases that might be a bit of a long shot, that might be very difficult, that might involve a lot of need for experts and things like that. And so what we've done is we've created this litigation unit, and what we say about the litigation unit is it doesn't have to make money, it just has to break even. And so, and we asked the community to help us make it break even by, donating to cover it. But basically, it's, it's an astounding thing for a group that's been an all-volunteer group for 22 years to actually hire an attorney, and not one but two. And so we're extraordinarily proud of the work we've done to get us to this point. And what I'd like to do now is introduce to you Paul Bossman, our Chief Counsel. Paul.
Thanks, Michelle. I'm Paul Bossman. I'm the Chief Counsel for Communities United Against Police Brutality. And I will probably not say anything as good as that last 5 stones line in this press conference. But what I really want to talk to you about is the Reinvestigation Workgroup and the cases that are sitting on that back table. The first case that I was involved with, Thurman Blevins was the one that made me get involved. To hear over and over as members of the Reinvestigation Workgroup were rewinding the tape and watching it frame by frame, because we didn't have any real technology yet for the Reinvestigation Workgroup to do their work. To hear over and over the last moments of his life, and then to watch the city's version of that. I would recommend that you get a copy of the report back there, which shows how the city toyed with the video and suggested, here's a circle, here's a gun, here's a circle, here's a gun, here's a circle, see the gun? And the Reinvestigation Workgroup showed that there was no gun there, that was the bumper and hubcap of a truck parked down the street. That made me want to get more involved in what we do. The first case that we worked with was Cordell Handy. The Cordell Handy case was 1,500 pages of BCA paperwork that was just sort of thrown out in no particular order. And there's almost no chance that an attorney's going to go through that. But what the litigation group found, they went and talked to people who wouldn't talk to the police. They found witnesses who said that Cordell did not have a gun in his hand at the time he was shot. And that allowed us to take that case. And that case is still progressing right now, is heading into settlement conference, possible trial in March. That report is back there. You should look at it. The Reinvestigation Workgroup also worked on Marcus Golden. In the Marcus Golden case, all the witnesses were police officers. There's nothing there but what the BCA provided in terms of paperwork. But they had photos of the crime scene in fresh snow in Minnesota. And the Litigation Workgroup went through with highlighters and traced the footprints and traced the car tracks and traced where the shell casings from the pistol ended up, and looked at the photos of where the bullets were and determined that they weren't, as the officers said initially, afraid they were going to be run over by a vehicle and then they fired at him right there. No, they were, after he had passed by, they took shots as he left. That case, we're looking at a settlement conference in the next month or so, and in the middle of discovery to get more information, because in that case, Marcus was hit in the back of the head with one bullet, and in the forearm, his left forearm with the other bullet. And there was no forensics done on any of the bullets as far as we can tell. They were just put in little Ziploc bags, put in a box, and no one bothered to do any analysis of where they came from, or who fired them, or what they went through. What's one of the other cases we did? We're doing a report on today. Travis Jordan. Travis Jordan, that's a kind of case that no attorney would take either. That's a knife case. In fact, I showed that case to several other attorneys to try and get them to take it. And the Supreme Court law on when you can shoot someone with a knife is just basically, if you feel that they might be a danger to someone, even if it's not to you, there is no record that you can't shoot them. And so they did. But the Reinvestigation Workgroup went through that tape frame by frame and showed that not only did the police officer fire 3 shots as Travis Jordan was walking with a knife by his side, sort of stiffly walking towards them, but then as he fell, they fired 4 more shots after he was on the ground and the knife had fallen from his hand. And no one would have seen that or taken that case. And the lower court has denied qualified immunity to the officer for those 4 shots. The city has appealed it as of Monday, and we're going to go to the Court of Appeals to fight that and preserve it and see if we can get some justice for the family. Also, I would recommend you look at that report And you can see the photos because they've sectioned bits of the videotape out that show the change in the angle of the gun. That's on the back table, and that we're releasing today. I'd like to talk about Jafford Smith. The Jafford Smith report, Jafford was killed in a driveway over in St. Paul, and they take statements from the officers and they release, the initial officer who ran into him and fired shots. And there are problems with his narrative, and those we're going to try. This has just recently been filed, and we've recently got an answer. There are problems with the narrative, but in that report, they omitted the officer who fired 7 rounds from a riot shotgun at Jafford's back, buttocks, legs, and feet as he was on his hands and knees facing away from the officer. That was never put in the report. We did eventually get that report in discovery, and I can tell you that even the BCA investigators, whose questions are extremely leading, like, was this at the point at which you felt you were in fear for your life or the lives of your fellow officers? That sort of leading question, not investigating, but trying to justify the shooting, even they were shocked. You can hear it in the audio of them saying, did you fire once? Did you fire twice? No, I fired 7 times. That's the kind of stuff that nobody sees in these reports that the BCA releases often a year after a police killing, because somebody has to go through the 1,200 to 1,500 pages of camouflage that's been played 52 card pickup with, gather that up, sort through it, catalog it, read it over again. Because the first time you read the police narrative. They read it again, and they read it again, and they find these facts that give us a way to get justice for families. So, as much as I'm proud of the work that we've done with the litigation unit, and I hope that people help us keep doing it, I really want to highlight the reports that are on those tables today. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Kobe's family's here, and I didn't even mention the Kobe Heisler report. The work that was done in Kobe's case by the Reinvestigation Workgroup, we couldn't even get them good video of what was happening in the room at that time. But they took blurred video and other copies of the video and went through it frame by frame to show what happened to Kobe. I don't want to talk too much about the case right now, but what the officers did was not necessary. They did not need to be there. They did not need to do it. They took the domestic, I'll just quote from the complaint so as not to step too far into the case. But the complaint says that they had a domestic violence expert who was on the scene, and the officer in charge sent that person away. The officer in charge sent the most junior person to talk to Kobe, a trainee officer. That officer, the officer who was in charge, was told that Kobe is he's very afraid of going back to the hospital. And of course, that's what the trainee officer told him, because he wasn't told not to by the head officer. And after that, he tried to run away, as people with his condition will tend to do. And instead of helping the one trainee officer who was trying to wrestle him, multiple officers shot him with tasers without giving him commands from very close distance simultaneously, which amounts to torture in my view, but not giving him any way to get out of the pain. And then he tried to run away again. The police say he had a knife in his hand. A knife was found on the scene, a paring knife with a blade about like that. And then officers in a very small room with another community member sitting on the couch in front of him, his grandmother, fired shots from multiple directions and stepped in and killed Kobe. And we would not know what went on in that room, except for what the police statements were and what the county attorney had said, that, he had a knife, and therefore they were in fear that he would hurt someone and they shot him. We wouldn't know how they created that situation if it wasn't for the Reinvestigation Workgroup. And that whole report is back on the table there, and I encourage you to get it and read it. I know that as we have gotten better, I'm sort of identifying myself with the Reinvestigation Workgroup, that's taking credit where I don't deserve it. But as we have gotten more and more experience and get better technology and better educated volunteers, Those reports get thicker. Some of those are 70, 80-page reports. It's worth reading those reports to see the kind of work that they've done. So I just want to give credit to them. I want to encourage you to get that. If you're a citizen, I want to encourage you to help support the work that both the Reinvestigation Workgroup and the Litigation Unit are doing to try and get justice for families, and in cases where the victims survive, for the victims of police brutality. That's what we're here for, and that's what we hope you're here for. Thank you.
So we're very fortunate today to have some of the families with us. And again, the work of the Reinvestigation Workgroup then feeds into the Litigation Workgroup, or the Litigation Unit, which is then able to go forward with lawsuits. And so we're very happy to introduce you to some of the families today. And Jason and Amity, do you all want to introduce yourselves, or? Come on up.
Sure, I'm Kobe's father, and he was killed in my mother's house in front of her. He'd been feeding her and living there and taking care of her. And he was autistic. And this is Kobe's mother.
Hi, I'm Amity Dimmick, mother of Kobe Heisler. Just so very, very grateful for what the work group, the Reinvestigation Workgroup, has done for us, and then for them creating the Litigation Unit and actually being able to take on our cases, because once again, as a knife cases for some reason are extremely challenging to get any justice in, and couldn't find an attorney who would actually take it for us. And so I'm so grateful to, you know, when you wonder if you're ever going to get a case, you're always told you can't talk. So there's a lot of stuff that we know that we haven't been able to talk about. And at the very least, I need people to be able to hear the other side, the rest of everything. Because, you know, our son was a beautiful boy. You know, he was a beautiful young man. He was nonviolent. He was a caretaker. He was artistic. I mean, the kid liked to crochet, not attack police officers. He hadn't hurt anybody or anything in his whole life. And so for the only narrative to be out there is what the BCA and the Hennepin County Attorney puts out, and what the slanted news stations decide to put out, is really hurtful, you know, to all of us. And so we get the chance to not only try to get accountability for what happened to our son, but also to be able to say all the things we've been wanting to say over the last 3 years. At some point we'll be able to explain everything, the reason why after 3 years we're still out here asking for justice. We're not doing it for no reason. I'm doing it because I believe with all of my heart and soul that what happened to my son shouldn't have happened, didn't need to happen, and I'm going to continue to ask for accountability, and I will do whatever I can and work with whoever I can and accept help from whoever is willing to try to see that happen. Not only for my son's case once we get this wrapped up, but then to flip over and continue to help the other families. And you know, I've been in this fight for 3 years now, and there are multiple groups that help. One of the groups that is the most direct help, the most sought after outcome for us, which is accountability, the group that has been able to provide that to me and my family the most is this group right here, Communities United Against Police Brutality. So I know lots of people support lots of groups. I would ask to please, please, please support Communities United anytime you can, because the work they do is really one of a kind in this area and so very important to the families. They're giving us what nobody else, all the people who should be giving it to us, aren't giving us. We're not even getting a chance to ask for justice. We don't even get a chance. So they are giving us this chance, and I'm so beyond grateful to all of you so much. Thank you.
I'd also like to introduce to you Marilyn Hill. We have not, we are investigating her son Demetrius's case. That process is ongoing right now, so we don't have a report for that case, but we will, and we're working on it. So, Marilyn?
Thank you. I am so grateful for all of you. God is good. Yes, my son, it's been almost 26 years now, and I'm not giving up hope. My son was killed back in 1997 in my mother's and father's apartment building, and I feel it's an unlawful death, wrongful death. He was shot in the back, and then on top of that, I have new news regarding the person that did the robbery. He was forced to leave town. So I'm looking for justice along with the truth to come out of my son's report, because a bunch of lies has been placed in this report, and it doesn't add up to what happened that day. The officer that killed my son, you know, he got shot in his back. 10 years later, I know justice was served, but the truth is still there, and the polices that are in my report, the information that was written, it doesn't add up to what really happened. And as time goes on, there's people that's talking, but only thing about it is the main source was forced to leave town, and I just found out this new news. And he's the one that can tell you everything, but I got some devastating information that I was going to share personally with someone, but I'm not going to put it out there right now. I just grateful that someone took the time to read and get my case going and get the records and the documents to put together, because it was sent to me scattered, you know, just like somebody flipped it up and just to confuse me. But as time went on, I learned that I had original report from the get-go, and then when I hired a private investigator and a lawyer, later on, they sent the information back to me indicating that he's leaving town. And I learned that the lawyer never left town. He was just forced to he was forced to discontinue with my case because of some information that the police tried to cover up. And so I am happy to know that there's people out here that cares and willing to support me and to help me move forward with this here, so I can find reasons and a purpose of continuing with this here case with my son. And so may my son rest in peace, and every mother and father that lost their child through police violence, I stand in solidarity with them. And I pray to God that, you know, people get what they want. And all these cops that's out here that's killing human beings, they need to be accountable for their mistakes, because they try to say there are mistakes, but actually it's really attention to kill. And this qualified immunity, it needs to come to a halt along with the statute of limitation. Thank you.
Thanks, Marilyn. Thank you. Jaffard, do you want to say a word or two?
Hi, my name is Tashira Garraway. I am the mother of Justin Tigan's now 16-year-old son. Justin Tigan was brutally beat to death by the St. Paul police and thrown inside of a trash dumpster August 19, 2009. And for all these years, I've been out here telling Justin's truth and trying to just let people know what is happening here. The fact that they can beat someone so brutally and our family have to endure that. We have to walk in a mortuary and see his skull cracked in half and dog bites on his body and his wrists detached from his arms. The inhumanity that Justin experienced, but also our family experience, and for these people to go home to their families and then for them to fabricate his story and to edit videos and not release videos as our family is trying to get the answers that we deserve. I have a 16-year-old son that deserves the answers of what truly happened to his father, not what the media wants to spin, and I want people to take a time and think about how would they feel if this was their family, how would they feel if this was their child that walked in the mortuary and didn't even know who his father was because he was beaten so badly. And he said, "That's not my daddy," because he couldn't even recognize his dad because his eyeballs were punched in so bad. So this is the reality that our families have had to live, for people to lie and for people to run with stories. And we've watched the police cover up murders time and time again. It's inhumane and it's sad. And I pray that these officers do find it in their hearts to come forward and to tell the truth. They know what they've done to my son's father. They know what they've done to the rest of these families. And they go home to their families. But the problem is that they don't see our black men as human beings. You have to see a person as a human being to even value their life. If I kill an ant on the floor right now, I'm not going to think about 6 months from now that I killed an ant on the floor because there was no value to the life of an ant for me. And that's how I feel that these officers look at our black men. But it's time for them to start looking at us as people. Our families deserve that much. Our families don't deserve for our loved ones to get murdered twice. It's enough when we have to know that we will never see our loved ones again. But then we have to look on the news and look on the media and look at the lies that are spent about our loved ones. And how can you tell a family what happened to their loved one? How can you be so brutal and cruel and evil to do that? And the media is a part of these cover-ups. The reason we're not getting any change is because the media controls the narrative and the story that gets out to the rest of the community. Fortunately, with George Floyd, they didn't have control over that. And there was a Facebook Live that spread all over the world, and they couldn't stop it. But the rest of our families haven't had that fate. The rest of us didn't have that privilege of having our story on Facebook Live. So we have to just go home and live with the truth that we know that these people have done to our loved ones. We got some of these officers that are involved in multiple murders. Joshua Lego was involved in Demetrius Hill murder back in 1997. Years later in 2009, the same officer is in my son's father's files. Derek Chauvin was around to kill people before he even got to George Floyd. And the only thing that stopped him was a Facebook Live. So this is the truth of what our families are going through, living with, having our loved ones murdered twice. And luckily, by the grace of God and good people like all of you that are standing with us, we're able to come together and we're able to tell our truth and able to tell our realities of what we know happened. Because we've lived the cover-ups. We've lived the edited videos. We've lived the videos just mysteriously disappearing. In my son's father's case, our family can't even get the video. Michelle Gross have requested the original video over and over and over again, and the investigation. Yeah, over 10 years ago. And the investigative team have requested this video. But miraculously, Liz Collins gets this false tampered with video that even our family can't get? Come on now. We've been told over and over and over again that there is no videos. 3 entities, the Emerald Grove Heights Police, the St. Paul Police, and the BCA will not release any video to our family to give us the answers that we deserve. But we walk in the mortuary and he's beaten to death, found dead after being pulled over by the St. Paul Police Department. The answers are all there, and it's just, we're tired, and we just want the truth for our families. If anything we deserve is the truth of what happened to our loved ones. Thank you.
So now we'd like to make a little presentation to the families to thank them for their work with us. We are the reason, they are the reason we are here. They are the reason that we do the work that we do. And so we'd like to give them a little presentation. Once again, we want to thank you so much for standing with the community. And thank you all so much. We want to thank you so much for making yourselves vulnerable and available to actually have your family's story told, have a reinvestigation. You know, these are not simple situations. Some of these reinvestigations take about a year to do. And the families are coming to weekly meetings and sometimes multiple meetings in the week to actually do this kind of work with us. And we need the families to be involved because so many times they knew who the people were that were involved in this case. They'll see a witness name and they'll go, oh, that's so-and-so's cousin. That's this other person or whatever. We don't know. They're just names to us. We don't know this situation, but they do. And so the families being intimately involved in these investigations is really, really essential. And we could not do this work without you all, and we do it for you all. And you're the reason we do the work. So thank you all again so much for being here. And at this point, we'll stand for questions. Any questions? Go ahead, Brixton.
I think it's probably pretty clear which organizations and governmental departments put roadblocks in your reinvestigations, but is there anyone out there who actually helps and is on your side?
It's an interesting question.
Sorry for the difficult question.
Honestly, all government entities, although they're subject to the Data Practices Act, seem to have a tendency to shy away from sunlight. They do all they can to keep people from accessing data. Sometimes some government agencies are a little bit less hesitant. You know, they'll maybe somewhat answer the data requests over some period of time. But we have literally just settled our 9th lawsuit against the city of Minneapolis for their failure to provide data. And this is an ongoing struggle. We're about to launch more lawsuits against more departments because we cannot get these folks to actually abide by the Data Practices Act. And so, and I think it's even more likely to happen, it's even more relevant when someone's been killed, because at that point, it's not just a matter of, we're too busy to get you the data, or this and that and the other thing, or we're mixed up about how to do it. Then it becomes, we're trying to cover up something. And so we even see much more of a tendency. I went with Amity and Jason and them when the Brooklyn Center Police first said that they would release the body camera footage. I went with them to view the body camera. But only after George Floyd was killed, that's right. They then decided they would show the family the body camera footage. But then when we got there, they made a big production. First of all, they weren't going to let anybody except Amity look at the videos, or I think Jason. And then once we got them settled down and we were able to go in that second visit to actually see the footage, they made a big point of saying you can't take any notes, you can't do this, you can't record anything, you can't do any of this stuff. And the versions of the video that they showed, when you got to the end, when you could see what the police were actually doing, they had like kaleidoscope effect. Like it was like the video suddenly got like swirly and kaleidoscopy. You couldn't see anything about what actually happened. And so, it's always about, for them, protecting themselves and their entity and their employees, not getting to the truth. So we often have great difficulty. And as Tashira talked about, I asked for her video with her over 10 years ago. We've been trying to get that video for 10 years. And other people have made requests for that video. They keep telling us there is no video, but yet on the property list, it shows a video. It lists a video as one of the pieces of property, but yet none of us have been able to access that video. And so, there is a lot of effort on the part of these entities to try to, maintain their narrative by keeping people from accessing the data.
Can I say something?
Hang on one second. Okay, let me see if there's any other questions, okay? Are there any other questions?
Michelle,
Yes, hi,
you
Liz.
mentioned that the video mentioned that there are some licensed
police officers that have helped, or is that right, that have helped out with some of these
Yes.
investigations? Do they come from any of the entities that have been involved in the police-involved shooting or killing?
Typically not, typically not. We have worked with some retired police officers, some police officers from other jurisdictions and things like that. They would typically not want to comment on something that one of their, I don't think we frankly ever asked them to. Typically, like I said, we worked with some retired officers and with some officers that testify as experts in other cases, things like that.
Okay.
But they're police practice experts, and that's why we need them.
Right.
So, other questions? Marilyn, you want to say another word?
Are you aware that,
You can come up front if you want to.
I just want to know who's aware of the police or people getting into your internet? Because when I had that film, when King Demetrius and Georgia Ford went down to the police station for when I had that chain of custody to release my son's property. And I done it for a reason, to have someone there to witness it and to share there where she was there with me inside. And so before I left, I took and opened up the box, and it was already spoiled. It looked like it's been broken into, it was mold on it. And when I opened it up, a lot of stuff was missing. And then in the report, as you read it, it was the guy that got robbed. He described them as a white strip going down some slacks. But at the hospital, they took off black jeans, and those jeans are missing. But then, all of a sudden, all the videos that I had stored over the period of time since protesting are gone off my computer.
Some stuff does happen. And that's an interesting thing that you raised about property, because I've gone to the central property rooms of a few police departments to assist families to get the property back. And quite often we find some kind of a thing missing. So for example, in the Jafford Smith case, Kay Smith, his wife, who unfortunately has passed away since then, but she was attempting to get back his watch. And his watch was a custom watch. She'd given it to him for their anniversary. It was an engraved watch, and it had great meaning to her, and she wanted it. And the medical examiner told us that the BCA had that watch. The BCA kept saying, we can't find it, we can't find it. It turned up in some guy's desk drawer. But this was after we hounded Drew Evans everywhere he went for a year. And this kind of thing. I went with Travis Jordan's mother to get his property back. And a very special bracelet that he had he was Hawaiian, and he was a surfer, and he had this very special leather bracelet that he always wore, and that came up somehow missing. These kinds of things, it's almost as if there's some souvenir collecting going on. I don't want to say it because I don't know if that's true. But it was appalling to us that Jafford Smith's watch was in some agent's drawer.
All the time.
And please explain that. It's ridiculous.
Scary that you say that, because
Yes.
it finally dawned on me a few months ago that, the stuff
Yeah, where's his stuff?
is just sitting on some inventory shelf somewhere, and that made me feel uncomfortable. So I went through the process of trying to find it, and I forget whoever I spoke to at the BCPD, but he was helpful. And then, apparently they have an inventory list, and and what I really wanted, I just wanted the stuff not sitting there, but I specifically wanted his Croc. One of his Crocs was with him, his shoes, the Crocs.
Right.
And I thought I could, for whatever reason, make it into something, because it was a Croc. I didn't know, nothing else.
Well, it's just something that matters to you.
But they say they don't know where it is.
Yeah,
And
see-
so now, I can't tell you for sure though, because they sent his uncle to pick up the box, and it's sealed. Clearly, that's not something we actually,
Right.
we don't want to see
yeah.
that, so maybe they snuck it in there, but as far as I was told, there's just a missing shoe, and I'm like, well, how do you have everything else, but you misplace a Croc?
Yeah, a shoe.
So
Yeah,
what does
This
it look like in there?
This is quite typical, like I said, for the families to have that type of experience where there is little to no recognition of the importance of people's belongings to those families. When that's all you've got left of your family member, that is an important thing for you. And so that's part of, kind of the work that we do as well, is to try to assist families with those types of matters. Do you have other questions?
wanted to add something, Michelle. With Justin, I remember that night, his friends that were in the car with him said that he had a pocket full of money on him, but yet they only reported like $11. I know damn well Justin didn't go nowhere with $11 in his pocket. So it's weird things like that, like money's missing, all kinds of stuff that is missing from our loved ones. And you look at this list that they have of everything, and stuff is even missing. They'll give you the list with all this stuff they put on the list, and then stuff will be missing from that list. And it's just ridiculous because we want to retrieve what's rightfully owed to our families.
Exactly. Thank you. So we're going to continue the work that we do with the Reinvestigation Workgroup. This is an interim report, if you will, because we wanted to release several of the reports that we've done over the last few years, and this was a great opportunity to do that and to meet up with the families, and essentially they are the ones releasing these reports. And like I said, I think these reports are important, but this work with the Reinvestigation Workgroup goes on. We have many cases, probably more than we can actually do, to take on, but we literally just take on and get through these investigations as best we can as an all-volunteer organization. And then, the next piece comes to the litigation if this is a case that can be litigated. And so I feel that having the now litigation unit just makes a nice sort of continuation of services for these families. So with that, we'll end our press conference, or unless you have a question.
I just have one more, Michelle. It sounds like the litigation unit has really helped some of these families file lawsuits and ultimately get into the settlement process. Is
Yes.
the ultimate goal to try and show this evidence and force the BCA to reopen some of these cases?
Paul?
The BCA can always reopen a case. There is nothing that we can do necessarily to cause that. I can tell you that the families that I've worked with are not interested in settlements. They're interested in the story of their loved one being told in open court where people can hear it. Sometimes we can get change through settlements that we can't get in court, so I encourage them to talk about it. But what all the family members that I've talked to want is for there to be some reckoning. It would be wonderful if the BCA would reopen those cases based on what we find in the civil suit, but we can't make them. Only you guys in the press can actually force them into doing that. Thanks.
Right, and understand that there is a difference between a civil suit and a criminal case. The BCA is the organization that investigates with the potential outcome being a criminal case, though that virtually never happens, except for this situation with Derek Chauvin. But, almost all of these kinds of cases don't result in a criminal prosecution. The BCA, like you said, like Paul said, could open these things again anytime. But once they have engaged in major gaffes in the investigations, really bad gaffes in the investigations, like the situation with Thurman Blevins, them saying that there was a gun, but in fact, our breakdown of the video frame by frame showed that it was actually a bumper and a hubcap of a truck in the distance. Once they have created that situation where they've made that phony allegation, it would be pretty hard to expect them to undo what they've already done. And I'm going to frankly say that they do an extremely poor job of investigating. The questions when they ask law enforcement witnesses are very leading. When they are interviewing witnesses, if the person starts to say something they don't want to have said, they will redirect that person with a different question, cut them off, and things like that. And they frequently don't interview important witnesses in the cases. They don't take proper measurements. They don't measure the light correctly. There are tons of ways that we have seen that the BCA does an exceedingly poor job of investigating. That's not to say that their job is any better or worse than an agency investigating itself. Typically those are quite poor as well. And even one agency investigating another agency. They're all law enforcement, and they come out of there primarily with the goal of basically making sure that that officer has no accountability. And we have seen it time and time again.
I want to ask a quick question real quick.
Sure.
Counselor, by any chance, would any of these police officers be held accountable, or is there any statute of limitation that prohibits them from being held accountable for lying, not only that, killing an individual?
Because we sue in civil court, and that's basically saying you did something wrong, pay the person you wronged. There are statutes of limitations on wrongful death. In Minnesota, that's normally 3 years. There is an exception written in the rule in Minnesota that says for acts that constitute murder. And in the case of Marcus Golden, we managed to get the court to let us use that exception to go past 3 years, through to 7 years, to put a wrongful death claim in. Because in our opinion, if you intentionally are firing a gun at someone and you did not have justifiable reason for that use of force, that's a murder. And that's why we've been able, at least in one case, to extend the liability for the financial liability in a civil lawsuit for that kind of use of deadly force. And it's a good thing in this case, because the trauma, as you can see, that the families go through, and then to try and organize an investigation, and to get cooperation from the government, and to find a lawyer, and to bring a lawsuit while, not wanting to get out of bed in the morning, is, in 3 years, that's a major obstacle for a lot of these families. So I'm proud of the work that we've done there to try and make it possible for more families to get justice.
Thank you, counsel.
Did that answer it?
Yeah.
You have a question?
Yeah, I was wondering, so it sounds like the litigation work group and the reinvestigation work group are entirely supported by the community, is that right? And I was just wondering, like, what can community members do to support those work groups? Like, can we donate money, or like if we don't have means, is there any other way that we can support?
Oh, that's a wonderful question, and thank you for that. These things do cost money, no question about it, and so we do, solicit donations from people. Our organization does not accept foundation grants or any kind of government money of any kind, only individual donations. And so, so for us, it's always an ongoing effort to try to raise the funds we need, but we also need volunteers. This work gets done by people who stay up at night and watch videos. I'm laughing saying that because I know that that's what these people literally do. They're looking all night on videos, and breaking them down into frame by frame and things like that. I typically review the autopsies and do a lot of that kind of work because of my background. And so we need people to actually take on doing this work. And we need funding to help pay for the technology needed, as well as once these cases go into litigation, experts are very expensive. You can spend typically, on a typical case, about $50,000 in experts. And so that's, these are not funds that the families have readily available. We also have in our Stolen Lives Justice Fund paid for people's independent autopsies, independent investigators of certain kinds, ballistics experts. We paid for a lot of those different kinds of things for families, financial experts, other kinds of experts that are needed in these cases, and these cases cannot happen without those things. So yes, thank you for asking that very lovely question. So other questions? We want to thank you all so much for being here. We want to apologize again for the technology problems, but hopefully, and we can give you those original videos if you'd like to have them. And also, please do take a copy of each of these reports. These are gifts from us to the community, but they're also from the hearts of these families. We have originals of all of the reports in those binders right there to the side if you'd like to look at the originals. But again, we have copies back there for you to take with you. So again, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate your time, and we appreciate your willingness to tell the story of these families and the work of the reinvestigation and litigation work groups. So thank you.
Thank you.